Okay, say that again, Kurt.
Well, I think process adherence as a means of creating great results is losing its viability. It's just
Yeah.
it's not delivering for us. And I think
Uh,
that's why I see your program as important and valuable.
Thank you. Yeah, it's actually, if you look at the science of learning, it's fundamentally flawed. I mean, seriously, fundamentally flawed. In fact, maybe I'll start out with this one example because it is really explains why you have to, where you start makes such a big difference. And I've written about this in the past, but for some reason I'm not. Oh, duh, it's right here in front of me. Um, how people react to theory that's been validated, that they can verify, is really critical. And the story of Ignaz Semmelweis is really, really, really important if you're a coach, if you're a consultant, or if you're a practitioner, if you're trying to learn anything. And I'm just putting it up here so you can see it, and it's on Wikipedia, and I'm just going to talk to it. I'm not going to read this. He was the he was the chief doctor at two maternity hospitals, and this was 1847. Okay. Or it was the 1840s, actually. Then in 1847, he proposed a solution. You could see the maternity mortality rate was 18% in one of the hospitals. This was the hospital where the rich people went. And the other hospital, which was where they took people who didn't have any money, they let them come to this maternity hospital. And the interesting thing was at that hospital, the maternity, the mortality rate was like normal, about 2% or even less than that. And this seemed odd that the hospital where you were a teaching hospital, you were advanced, you had well-to-do clients were dying, 10 times the rate of the other one. And he tried to figure out why. And so he started tracking it, getting data, interesting enough, right? So he was getting data. And what he noticed was that there were times that the mortality rate dipped and went to normal, and then it went back up. And he wondered why. What was the event that happened? And he realized that those were the events he was out of town. Now, if he was a detective, or if he was a Dr. Heckle, Mr. Hyde type thing, he'd be wondering what's going on. But he knew he was not a serial killer. So he knew something was going on that was correlated with his not being there. It turned out the maternity hospital with the high mortality rate was a teaching hospital, and the other one wasn't. And he was one of the main teachers. So they didn't teach when he wasn't there. So he surmised that the cause and effect must be due to the fact that teaching was not going on in the hospital when the mortality rate dipped. So then he wondered what's going on there. Well, the only real thing that happened there in the teaching that might have had an effect was the fact that they worked, the students, the doctors to be, would do autopsies, and they would be working on the cadavers, and then they would go and work on the maternity. Now, I'm sure they wash their hands of blood and stuff like that, but germs are really tiny. Blood doesn't get off. I mean, they don't get off just by washing hands. So he made a hypothesis to himself. He thought, well, I better separate these. I don't know why. I have no idea why this is happening, but it seems to be highly correlated. So let's see what happens if we separate the cadaver touching with the maternity people. And he thought, well, the best thing to do, even though I don't really know why, is disinfect the hands with lye. That was kind of a decoupling, as if it hadn't happened. And he just guessed. This was an experiment, you could say. He ran an experiment. He had no evidence for it, no understanding. But immediately the mortality rate dropped from 18% to 2%. Now, here's what's really interesting. He had data, he had proof per se, but he had no explanation for it. So, how did the other doctors in the hospital react? How did the administrators react to this absolute solid data? They reacted by not wanting to do this. Why? Because there was no explanation. And there was also no theory to understand it. And he couldn't give one either. He just had data. And in fact, it wasn't until later when Louis Pasteur came out with germ theory that it was accepted. So this is this thing that's just been around forever. It's not like people have gotten a lot smarter or different in the 170 years since then. The fact is, if people don't have an explanation for why what's happening is happening, they tend to ignore the data. So this idea of empiricism alone is flawed, is evidence that it's flawed. In fact, what's funny is I have empirical evidence to show that empiricism alone has failed, but people don't pay attention to that. Yeah, it's ironic and it's funny, and I mean it with a little twist, because I have been complaining about this for 15 years. I brought this up in 2009 when I asked Don Reinertson, I didn't have a grasp on it at the time. I knew there was something wrong. And I sent a note to Don. I said, Don, can you explain this to me? And he did better. He wrote this 2, 3, 4 page document talking about types of processes back in 2009. And I've never been able to get anybody to really engage in this conversation. But anyway, so what I'm going to do today is different than what I've done in the past. Okay. Uh, what I believe is the fundamental flaw in Agile is there are two camps out there. One camp believes in empiricism, and the other camp believes in you want to look at the physics of flow. Or if you go to the technical side, then you could talk about coding quality. As like Bob Martin talks about, which I'm a big fan of, that there are rules here. In my book, Design Patterns Explained, with Jim Trott, and in the workshops Net Objectives used to do, we would talk about core principles. Now, I got to use the word principle and define it, because principle is a word that um, a principle is a word that has multiple meanings, and it's very important to understand the meaning. One meaning of a principle is as a guide. In other words, this is saying that we should be doing this. The Agile Manifesto has a bunch of these, and they're good principles, most of them anyway. Actually, I don't think I have any problem with the principles, but that's another issue. But there's also this thing called first principles, and first principles are principles that are kind of like the laws of physics or the physics of flow. I mean, physics of flow. It's like, and we've seen these, and we've actually had a whole series on them, which I'm putting all this together on a big page and in the website as well. But there are 5 hours of videos now with this, but I'll just to remind people about it, I'll pull this up. This is a document that we've gone through in gory detail. And by first principles of flow, I mean things like this. Multitasking causes delays in workflow, which causes waste. Multitasking itself is bad, but the delays it injects are even worse. Multitasking is only going to take you down around 40% of your efficiency. You can go down 90% by the delays. It can add work. The creation of waste is additional work to be done. I'm not going to go through these, but this is what I mean by the first principles. I've already gone through these. If you haven't been in the Amplio community of practice, there is a website where I've set this up. In fact, I might as well, since some people might be watching this right now, there is a website I've set up, and I'll show you what I'm doing with it. The if you go to the home, successengineering.works, and you go to resources, presentations, and events, these are where we have these sessions. And I've marked them this way so you can see them clearly. Here we go. And by the way, this is just another interesting one I did at a meetup. But why systems thinking so important? First principles, value stream management. Here I don't have one. I got a lot of little guys. So these are all about 10 or 15 minutes. And then you go up to the top, and that's it. Now, what I'm also doing, just to let you know, this is not ready yet. It'll be ready in a couple of days. If you go to Amplio and you describe the system there, Amplio Foundations, I'm putting all those in an order as a self-study with writing and video, so you can study. But that's not germane right here. But here's the point. These first principles I'm now starting to call verifiable theory. Thank you, Susan. I love the term the more I use it. Because the thing is, people bandy about principles. Like when I talk about first principles, they talk about Jeff Sutherland's first principles of Scrum. And I say, that's great, but those aren't first principles like the physics of flow. Those are what he uses to justify Scrum. They don't stand on their own. That's his theory about why Scrum works, which, by the way, I disagree with. So his theory, in my opinion, isn't verifiable. So I just want to make clear that what I mean by principles, when I use the word, I'll usually say first principles of knowledge work. Because guess what? There are a lot of other first principles. Newton's laws of physics are kinds of first principles in this sense. Now, why I don't call this laws of knowledge work, because in knowledge work, it's not quite as strong as in physics. And then I get into this whole argument about using the wrong word. So if you wonder why I don't use laws, that's why. Okay. So here's what I want to do. I want to look at this. And instead of me having written down all the implications of this, I want to actually add to it as we go and have a conversation. Because if you start with the physics of flow, or if you start with there's no verifiable theory, you just have to use empiricism, and it's because we're at in a complex system. And by the way, I'm not disputing we're in a complex system. Of course, we're in a complex system. In fact, I take it further. It's always complex if people are there. And what's worse, you can have disasters when it's not complex. In other words, complexity is not the issue. Complexity obscures the issue. I'm going to say that again. Complexity is not the issue. Complexity obscures the issue. In other words, you don't see what's going on. So if there's a way to unobscure it, you're going to be good. I'll give a simple example of how simple, excuse me, can be a disaster. Think of the straw that broke the camel's back. This is a very simple relationship. How much weight can the camel hold? And he can do well, do well, do well, do well, back's broken. This is true for metal fatigue and stuff. You can calculate this down to the second it's going to break. However, it's simple, but it causes unpredictable behavior. It's this unpredictable, what we call nonlinear behavior. A little change makes a big difference. So I want to be clear, complexity is not the issue to me. It's understanding what's going on is the issue. And when you have complexity, you can't see it all, but you can take away the things that are obscuring it. But that's another issue. I'll just throw that out because I'm thinking of how some conversations people might have. So when there's no verifiable theory, there are a lot of challenges with this. And one of the challenges with this is that you really don't have anything to hold on to. There's no you're slow to learn because you don't have access to in fact, I'm going to put some comments here as I go. This is what I want to talk about. And I want you to be thinking about this as I do this. I want you to add this. I want us to be doing this together. That's why I'm not in presentation mode. I'm actually in a let's look at what's happening mode here. And in this case, without verifiable theory, there's can't relate past experience as well. You're not going to believe data, evidence. Whereas here, you can say, oh yeah, I saw that before. See, now think about this. When you say I saw that before, you didn't see the exact thing a lot of times. I mean, sometimes you did, and that's experience. But sometimes you see something similar to it, but you can connect the dots because you understand the theory behind it. Okay? So, in fact, you have this. Here, I should make them apples to apples here. And what does that do? By the way, what does that do when somebody tells you something where there's a little theory and you could relate it to your past experience? What does it do? How does it make you feel?
If you're confident,
Yeah, this increases your confidence. Whereas here, it's kind of interesting. See, I've always thought this decreases confidence because I don't know what's going on. See, this is the weird thing about Agile to me. I have seen this from day one, and I do mean day one. Agile is supposed to be about people to a large extent. In fact, people have chastised me for focusing so much on the process and so much on the rules. And I say, I'm focusing on them because I like the people. I trust the people. I just need them to do the right stuff. And when they do that, they feel better about themselves. And that's a good thing. But when you are always trying to implore people to do better, when you're trying to get somebody motivated, what does that imply? They're not motivated? See, this is the whole weird thing. You got to accept people as they are. This is one of the other things about values. Okay, so I just throw those in. But see, the physics of flow, when you have that, you can understand up front because, here, let me just take these. I'll just copy these as I go. When you understand up front, this, again, this trust yourself. You use, well, actually, I'm going to use that for another one. When you understand up front, more power to move forward because you see what's going on. Here, you're slow to learn. And you're slow to learn because starting at ground zero, if you can relate your past experience because of verifiable theory or somebody says something, you say, oh yeah, I understand that. I can move forward faster because I have a deeper understanding. Does that make sense? You know, so we're slow to learn. When we start this way, it gets worse. You say, how can it get worse? Well, it does, because it keeps going down. See, this is the one I hate, but that's because I am a bit arrogant at times. I'm not arrogant when I'm sleeping, so it's not 24/7. But I hate to be told to follow. And I say this, I've said this for 20 years, never trust a consultant. Now, yeah, and I get that reaction that Tony just gave me too. Now, by never trust a consultant, I don't mean consultants aren't motivated. I don't mean that they don't that they don't have your best interests at heart. I mean, if they can't explain it, don't trust that what they said is true. Don't trust that what they're saying is right. And if they can't explain it, then I wonder if they really understand it. Now, I don't actually agree with Feynman's, you got to explain it as a 6-year-old. I'm sorry, you're not going to explain Fourier transforms, Laplace transforms to a 6-year-old. I mean, forget it, you know. In fact, it's hard to explain that to adults. But you should be able to explain it. I like Einstein's more. If you can't explain it, you don't understand it. So if you can explain it, then don't tell people to follow it. And if you tell people to follow it, that implies you don't understand it. So when you get this where you're taking advantage of latent knowledge, you know, again, it's trust themselves. And I realized this morning. People trust themselves this way. And here you have to trust a consultant. Where are you putting your consultant? This breeds lack of confidence. Do you get the psychological effect of all this stuff? It's devastating. And it's devastating because it's not conscious. It's just there. It's just present. I'll give you a quick example of this. You ever go into a room where you're teaching? Don't necessarily try this, although it can be fun. And you can recover from what you're about to do if you do this. If you're teaching a class, you walk up to the front of the room, you just look at people very sternly, and you say, hello, classroom. And you watch their reaction. They're back in the 6th grade. And all the feelings of being back in the 6th grade hit them. I do that sometimes, but then I'll explain why I did what I just did. And I explain, look, me being up at the front of this room necessarily means I'm a teacher and you're a child and I'm going to tell you what to do. Not because you think that, but because you've been trained to be that. And then I have to explain that's not what I'm doing. In fact, something, I think I left this out of the book, but I'm going to put it in. The first time I ask a question when I'm teaching something, I usually say, oh, I'll ask somebody, well, why do you say that? Oh, wait a moment. I've got to explain that question. Because if you've gone through elementary, mid school, and junior school, and senior school, high school, things like that, then you know that when a teacher, an instructor, and I'm kind of like that, asks, why do you say that? They're not really interested in why you say that. They're telling you you're wrong in a nice way, and they want to understand why you're wrong, so they can explain the right way to you. I go through this. And I say, when I ask you, why do you say that? I want to know what you're thinking, because you could be right and I'm not right. Maybe there's a disconnect. Okay, that's just a coaching tip. Anyway, you see how these just work against us. They just do, and we don't even notice it, that it's working against us. By the way, this is why Paula Stewart and I wrote the book, Being a Value Coach, being an effective value coach, leadership by creating value. It's got all this kind of human stuff that we all kind of ignore, but when it's pointed out, are aware of. Okay, well, this naturally, in fact, I don't even think I need to put this here, because this naturally leads to resistance, and this naturally leads to motivation, because confidence does that. And being told you don't know, being told you got to trust somebody, leads to resistance. I'm going to pause for a couple seconds here. Anybody, y'all relate to this, I assume. I mean, it's kind of clear. I'm just observing it. Anybody want to add something to this at this point? You're on mute, Bill. I see your lips going.
Making a Japanese monster movie. Sorry about that. All right, so I hear what you're saying, and absolutely. And I posted on the chat there.
Oh,
There's
I'll look at that.
the context. Even if you're playing with the flow, there's still a context.
That's
People are going to
correct.
walk into the situation with the predetermined expected outcome because they have all the biases going on. The reason that's occurring because they're cognitive overload in what we do as a coach or as a participant being coached. We're overwhelmed with a lot of crap that just taxes the daylight out. So we go for shortcuts and then bam, 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 bam.
That's right.
You stand a better way. There's no question about it with the right here with the flow. But those are things as a coach we need to pay attention to.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I'm really glad you said that, because you have to defeat that conversation before you can have a real conversation. I remember a client I was brought into by kind of a director level person. And she liked me because I wasn't imposing anything. And she knew I wasn't imposing anything. She knew I was going to work with the team and discover what they thought was best and then work in that way. So she knew that about me. And that's why I was brought in. But I knew the team didn't know that about me. So I'm walking into a place that has had consultants in the past tell them what to do. So the first thing I do is I talk about that. I said, look, I'm not here. This isn't our book. I said, I have some experience. I've been doing this for a long time. You know more about your work than I do, though, and I'll never catch up. And this is a conversation I also have. So what we want to do is take advantage of my experience and take advantage of your knowledge, and together we'll figure out what to do. And this is not going to be an imposition. You have to defeat that conversation that's going on in their head. I've talked about this in the past. This is what I call their listening as a noun. What's going on in their head? You walk into a client, then all the things that you mentioned, Bill, a lot of those are going on in their head. The thing I just mentioned, that oh, another consultant. If you don't talk to that conversation, it just gets louder and louder and louder. Now, it can be scary to talk to that conversation. I'm not saying it doesn't take courage. I've just had a lot of training in this. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, so then we have to be purposely incomplete. Now, the purposely incomplete is kind of interesting. I understand why. If all you have is empiricism, and if all you have is a straight number of things to do, then you can't put everything about it. Imagine this. how many different possible solutions are there out in the world for agile development? I mean, I'll use the mathematical term for infinite. Infinite, there are a lot of definitions for infinity in mathematics, but one of them is a set is infinite if it has n elements and you could prove there's one more. This is why I need an infinite amount of coffee every day, because maybe the next one will do it. But so the point is there are millions, thousands, it's limitless. So of course we have to be incomplete because otherwise we'll overwhelm people. And that's true. You can't give everything. But what if you designed it to get you a quick start where you're not overwhelming people, and then later in the spiral up, you give a way to expand on the quick start? So purposely incomplete means you have to reinvent. You know it's incomplete. You're starting out with something new. It results in the Satir J curve where, oh my God, I got all this extra work. People start complaining about it. Whereas if you get a quick start, and now here's something that, let's see if I've actually got it ready to show. I do. It's really cool. This is in process. And actually we have Sergio and Susan here. They're kind of spearheading this and I'm working on it with them too. Is this thing where we're looking at what's in the Scrum guide. And then how do you say, well, we need a little bit extra, some optional things extra. And yet, how do we expand this out? In fact, you can keep expanding this out. This goes all the way out to scale. But I'm just going to not show that because that's overwhelming a little bit. And there's a lot of stuff. And then there are even options. And there are a lot of things I find that a 15-minute conversation, I'm not kidding. Some of these things I have found invaluable. It takes 15 minutes to get starting. This starting with test first, I'll give it to you right now. It takes 2 minutes. Whenever somebody asks you to do something, ask them, and how will I know I've done that? So you're asking for the test specification. That's not hard. You're now trained in test first level 0. That's what I call it, test first level 0, because it's right to base. Okay, so again, we have this purposely incomplete. Now, what does this do? You ever walk into well, your garages are probably meticulous and nice. You walk into a neighbor's garage that's a little messy and you look at how bad it is and you decide you're going to help them clean it up and you're like, oh my God, I'll be here forever. Okay. Where all the people that have anything to do with cleaning, they always say, take it in little bites, take it in little bites. So this is the idea. How do you get a quick start? How do you get something that's core? But then how do you, well, what's the effect of this? Okay, and then I'll show you how you can even get better. See, if it's purposely incomplete, you're going to have to figure it out yourself, or you're going to have to pay somebody to require more training. So it's either ineffective or requires more training. I mean, if you don't get the training, you just have to reinvent it. Or there's no resistance because, oh yeah, I can do this. I'll get started with this. I understand it. I'm motivated. I take advantage of what I know. Do you see how no resistance builds on all this stuff? Whereas here, I'm going to need more training because I've got to overcome things. I'm going to have to reinvent the wheel. Actually, I probably should split these, reverse these now that I think about it. Purposely incomplete means I reinvent the wheel. Yeah, I'm going to just do it right here. And then I'll change this slide later. I like this though. It's more, you got to reinvent the wheel. So then it requires more training.
If I can add, well,
Please.
in that, if you do it properly, you will reinvent the wheel, because maybe you start doing and making changes.
You reinvent the square.
Situation.
I love that. Thank you. You reinvent the wheel at best. Oh, it's awesome. Yeah, I've actually thought that too, but I didn't think about it here. That's right. So you're starting to see my concerns with this, but it still gets worse. Okay. Oh, okay. So here we go. Okay. So no resistance. Yeah, I'm good here. Okay. So now, so we reinvent the wheel. Now here we've got something a little bit different. Yeah, I got this right. Good. Okay. Now, so now notice what's different. So let's go back just a little bit because I changed that order. So here we have reinvent the wheel. We got no resistance. Why? Because we're learning. We don't have all this extra work to do. But now what happens is this requires more training. And now we've talked about patterns in the past, the session before. So here's what's cool. And I know this is kind of embedded in the middle of this, but I said I was going to talk about patterns. And this is where they get to be very powerful. Just remind people what they are. So a pattern provides a solution to a problem by attending to the context the problem is showing up in and the issues involved. So it's very well set for where you are. It's got a name so you can talk about it. It's got the challenge or problem that's being solved. There's a reason I prefer the word challenge, but it's like what's being presented to you that's difficult. The forces and how they relate to the context. For example, if you're doing planning, the forces will be for how long, who's involved, how much do we know, how complex is the work, are our people available, things like that. It's the core of the solution. It's not a solution. It's not the solution, but it's like, well, sprint planning is an example of it would say, how you could do it. There are related patterns, and then you could provide example implementations, and then we made a note we'd also like to add the risks of different implementations. So the pattern isn't a solution in the sense do this. It's rather this, I've got this intention, and now I've got all these issues to attend to, which you probably only get when you've been in there and had that experience. But notice what's interesting is because I can relate to my latent knowledge and ambient knowledge as well. And latent knowledge is stuff that's in the past. That latent knowledge kind of comes in two flavors. One is it's down there. It can be brought up. It can be something that is exactly similar to what we're talking about, or it could be something similar to something else, like nearby, you could say. So ambient's another word, another kind. But the point is now I'm faced with, instead of having to do more training, I can go, if I have a pattern to look at, I now have multiple ways of doing it. I'm relating to my past experience so I can understand the forces and I could figure out what to do. This is something I don't have it in the spiral, but I have this thing I call factors for effective value streams, which enable you to make the decisions. Amplio has that. In fact, I guess I should target that. Here, let me just take one of these.
So would you say that the factors for effective value streams are the ones that will let you go to the spiral on the right, and that the patterns are the theory?
It's part of it, yeah, because they're based on that. Here, I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. So includes factors. And we have a video on this too, by the way. That's one of the foundation. Make that a little wider. Okay, here, let me pull that up. Okay, so if you look at these here, in fact, let me do, oh no, I have a lucid board. See, one of the things I love about when you start thinking about things this way, what you also do is you start asking yourself, how can I help people remember this stuff? See, it's not about being purposely incomplete because otherwise you would overwhelm them. See, that's a false assumption. You do not have to be purposely incomplete to avoid overwhelming them. The goal is to avoid overwhelming them. So what you want to do is, how do I avoid overwhelming them? Well, a pattern is one way of doing it because it gives you a way to encapsulate a whole bunch of things. But here, I hope I brought this up to date. It's got to load this in because I think I changed a couple of things. But we'll find out in a second, won't we? Yeah, I didn't quite get here. So I tell you what I'm going to do. If we ignore this, I wanted that there though. Okay. Oops, screwing up my document. You just saw the demonstration of why Control-Z is the best key on the keyboard. That's the undo key. Okay, so if you look at this, these are the first principles. Well, delays in getting feedback and taking advantage of lessons learned. Maybe what you want to do is see, is this going to get me actionable feedback? So factors for effective value stream are reflections of these in a way that you can take advantage of it. Like handoffs risk knowledge. Well, maybe you want to organize people to avoid multitasking and handoffs and things like that. So you could come straight from here, but I tried to make them easier to understand. Again, this in Paula's in my book. Try to make them easier to understand. That's what I mean by factors for effective value streams. And again, we have a video on this on those pages I showed you at the beginning. By the way, the idea of first principles in my mind and factors for effective value streams is based directly on the idea of inherent simplicity of Ellie Goldratt, where he talks about at the core, a few things govern everything. And this is something that a lot of people don't believe, but I do. The interesting thing is he doesn't say you see them all. It's kind of like watch 30 Seconds from Disaster. There's a great, I'm part engineer, I'm part mathematician, I'm part psychologist. That's my background in training. And I love 30 Seconds from Disaster for a couple of reasons. I'm very interested in disasters of engineering, not because I'm morbid, not because I like people to get hurt, but because it occurred to me once years and years and years ago that the people who designed the Titanic were the best designers in the world, and they made some obvious stupid mistakes, which kind of implied to me, I don't care how good I am, I'm going to make some obvious stupid mistakes unless I learn something different. So I started reading Engineering Disasters. Petrovsky is one of my favorite. I've read several of his books. And you have to start doing this. But what's interesting, the thing about 30 Seconds from Disaster, it's on National Geographic and YouTube, and you can find them. I mean, it's by National Geographic, is they unwind the events. And what you see is it's always these little simple dinky things that cause the disaster. And the complexity of the situation obscured it. So yeah, there's complexity, but it's the individual relationships aren't that bad. Anyway, I'm probably going too far. So yes, we have factors for effective value stream. We have the patterns. This helps us choose what we want. Okay, I'm going to pause again. I've got, well, maybe I'll do one more and then I'll pause again. Let's get this one then. This is another thing. This enables us to focus on the real work. What's our problem? Oh, here it is. Here's how we work on it. Whereas here, we just need more coaching so somebody else can help us how to do this. Now, it may be true at some point you figure out what's going on, and at some point you don't need this, but why go through all that? And as Sergio aptly pointed out, maybe you don't invent the right wheel. Here, let me fix these two guys. You know, maybe you invent something else. So we're now spending our time on more training, on more coaching, which first of all, we don't have the budget for. So actually we don't get it most of the time. So there's a lot of problems with that. So then we have to invent the wrong stuff, or we do invent the wrong stuff. We don't have to. And it gets more and more frustrating as we go. And then we're left with this, but what you're doing is immutable. So your frustration is at a peak, and now you're told, I can't change it. Oh my goodness. Whereas here we've got these options again on how to choose our work. No wonder we have Scrum Butt. What can I do? I don't know. This has you learn together. That's the other cool thing. You're studying the problem, you're working together, you're figuring it out. Now, I do want to point out something here. I don't mean that everybody needs to know all of this. This is what a coach would do. A good coach would point this out. The reason coaches are losing their jobs now, this whole model is messed up. The coach doesn't have the stuff to teach the people, so you get more and more training, more and more reinvention of things. And it should be no surprise that you're really messed up. That it's just a bad model. And whereas here, not everybody needs the training. See, my model isn't that you get everybody learning whatever the approach is, because you're going to take advantage of their latent knowledge. When you take advantage of their latent knowledge, this is often sufficient. A coach helps this upward spiral go through things. And the other people learn as they go and as they need to. And yes, you need to do little mini lessons at times. That's why in the ACE program, we give all the slides to the people so they can do little mini lessons. But it's about learning together. You don't tell the team what to do. Remember, we don't want to trust consultants. We're learning together. Until finally, and this is the big justification, it's difficult to master. I mean, this is the best sales pitch. I'm going to give you something that's going to cost you a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of training. Oh, but the first few pages, which don't really do you much good, they're free. And then it's going to be difficult. They're telling you right up front where you're ending up. It doesn't have to be this way. See, product development, yeah, just 1 second, Susan. Product development may be difficult to master, but the process to get there shouldn't be difficult to master. Yeah, Susan.
One thing that occurs to me, the way you have it laid out now, is that one of the advantages of the green side is that you get people to focus on the actual work they need to be doing and learning how to do it. And on the other side, you may have occasional upticks from the Hawthorne effect, but people will relapse. And by the Hawthorne effect, I mean that there was a thing that was done somewhere or other in that every time they changed something in the workplace, things improved for a while because people were being paid attention to.
Yes.
And then it went back. And the left-hand side is exactly the sort of thing that will cause that to happen. So people may think the coaching is helping, but all it's doing is changing things a little bit. And then once people realize it still doesn't work, they fall back.
Exactly. Yeah, that happens as well for sure. So, and this is
Yeah, I want to add one thing to that, building what you just said. Look, I mean, I'm all for simplicity as well. The problem that I see as a coach or just anywhere is that they're working on the how. Boy, we know how, but they've forgotten why and what. And therefore,
exactly.
if you're working on the how, you'll never know when it's done. You never know what you're trying to accomplish that you meet that goal. And it's insanity. And just by looking at flow, like we're talking about and all of this stuff, you don't have to get a lot of training and all the certifications. Just actually clean it up, get rid of stuff that doesn't add value. That's a big plus. And then learn how to work with the why and how.
Now, you mentioned something that people tend to ignore, get wrong, or wrong. I don't want to say it that way. There's a distinction when you say you're all for simple or simplicity. I am too, but what does simple mean? And there are different kinds of simplicity. There's simple build, simple define, and simple use. And those are different things.
Yeah.
You know, and agile, as Scrum does it, Scrum is simple. No, it's simply defined. It's hard to use, hard as hell to use. In fact, it's difficult to master. They even admit it's difficult to master. So we have to make a distinction, like which is simple, which is simpler. And I bet we have a whole bunch of consultants in here, because what a consultant will do in answer is it depends. So this, I'm priming you to be an expert consultant here. Which is simpler, Model T or a Tesla? Well, if you look at how it's built, a Model T is simpler. If you look at the number of pieces, the Model T is simpler. If you look at how to drive it, you probably couldn't even start the damn thing, because it didn't have automatic ignition. It didn't have a lot of stuff. Okay. Even if you've never driven a Tesla, I bet you can walk into it, step into it, and figure out where the on button is. So that's the other thing. It's simple if you have some context for it. I remember the first time I got into a car that didn't have a key. It was like, how do you turn this thing on? Except they told me, but you know what I'm saying? It's like simple is always contextual. So you have simple build, simple use is contextual. This is why, by the way, this is a side note, why I want to eventually get into my UX course. The reason software is so complicated to use, it doesn't pay attention to the context in which it's being used, called being used by humans. Anyway, that's another issue. So we still have a few minutes. This is the last slide I had. Oh, I did have this. I liked this. A comfort zone has less to do with control and more to do with knowledge. Because Bill, you made this comment about you fall back into theory. And this is why we fall back into theory. I say this another way. A comfort zone is less, to do with habit and more to do with lack of understanding. That's really what he means. I just quoted exactly. That's the context of people. See, this is not paying attention to how people learn. This is paying attention to how people learn. In that regard, I'd almost say this is not agile and this is agile, because this is not respectful and this is respectful.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem is, and this is the other piece that's been ignored, we're in this cycle because the agilists have convinced management that you need this stuff. And we've got certification to do it. This is now the trap the agile industrial complex has caused. People have now sold this as a model. And now we blame management for having bought it. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now, that's basically what I'm trying to do, is change this whole thing. Okay, so I'm going to be quiet for a few minutes and you guys think about it and give me your comments.
I find that green, absolutely. I mean, yeah. However, it's the very scary for your clients to start swimming in the green.
Yeah, it can be. It can be. That's why it's important to have a quick start. So you can start with a structure. In fact, I did want to talk about this. I think I like the order of patterns, how to choose, and then focus on the real work. I think I'd like to flip these two. As I'm thinking of, this is, oops. Yeah, I messed this up. It's how to choose options at work. This is what I want to flip.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I did that, it felt funny because the patterns give us how to choose, and then this gives us a focus on the real work. Okay. So yeah, but no, what you said, Bill, I'm sorry. I do want to say one more thing on this, what you said, Bill. This is important, but this is also a way you can help reduce the J curve to some extent. If you give them enough to work with, then that is somewhat the key. Is that you have to give them that. And here we go.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's why you phase it in. So in fact, let me actually show you this last thing, because this is one of the things I'm going to talk about in more detail not next week. Next week we actually don't have a session. I'm going to be in an airplane. Next week is the week off, so I'll send out an email to remind you it's 2 weeks. But so what you said is absolutely true. And what we have to do is overcome the beginning. So the way you can do what I call the Scrum quick start with the Amplio. See, and I wrote about this a long time ago, and it's funny, I could get nobody interested in it, probably because I wasn't using a patterns model, but I called it Scrum as example. And this is something you can do like that. In other words, look at Scrum. I've got all the things that are in Scrum, either check marked because the name is obvious, or I sometimes put in what it is because there are multiple ways of doing things. But what if you look at Scrum as everything they tell you to do as an example way of doing it? In other words, the problem is they don't tell you what it's an example of. In other words, what's an increment? What's an example? What's the context? What's the why you're doing this? They just tell you how to do it. Well, if you consider that that's one way of doing it, and you look at all the intentions of it, like think of it as a default. In other words, you remember this definition of the pattern. Think of the Scrum role, event, artifact, or rule as an example implementation of how to do that. And it's just an example. You don't have to stick to it, but start with that. Then you could start with a Scrum as easy as it is. And then when you run into problems, you don't reinvent the wheel. You go look at the pattern associated with it, which is what this is. And now these here are described as patterns, not described as hows. See, Scrum defines everything as a how. We define it as a pattern. But notice that you could take their how, that's just an example implementation. Just peg that as a default setting. It's like getting a radio set with the preset buttons for, oh yeah, I like rock music. So I got the rock music. I can change it later if I want to. It's the same thing. But now I have all the information I need to start. So if people are nervous, you can adjust this nervousness about how much do you have to give them. Now, this is about Scrum. Amplio actually has a set of patterns based on different areas. And then we address a lot more things. You know, what's the risk levels? It in scope, ready to implement. So you can take this out to scale in a big way. In fact, that's what we do. We look at the whole organization. Amplio has two pattern languages. One is a pattern language at the team level, which is what I'm talking about here because I said I'm going to start with Scrum, or not Scrum, but the team level.
Mhm.
And then it has another pattern language. Oh, duh, it's the same diagram. See, we have the quick start. We have Amplio team, which is how does a team work? It's got more things in it. Amplio development is the full team level. It goes as far as Scrum at scale. And then Amplio at scale goes up to like 500 people or a little more, but that's about right. So you can see how you can start where it's not overwhelming. And remember, each of these can have a default setting, or some of them, like decide on sprints. You notice some of these things here where there's a check mark, there's a virtual collaboration board. I've got videos on most of these, or at least articles. How do you decide whether you're doing sprints or time boxing? So this is another good point, Bill. If you feel you have to figure it all out, it adds fear. What's weird when you think about it, and when I think about it, because I totally agree with what you said. But what's weird is if you saw this whole cycle, I'd be scared shitless with this one. But because you start with, oh, it's so simple, it looks easier. Whereas here, what I suggest is not teach everybody, just teach your Scrum Master, teach your coach, and let them guide it. By the way, side note here, guys, this is the paid announcement. If you're a Scrum Master already and you want to learn how to do this, it's a 6-month program for $995 you can do on your own time and in your own schedule. So this is not a hard thing. I'm convinced that we can lower costs of training down by 10% of what it is and make it 10 times more effective. That's what we're working on in the ACE program, as well as people are working together. There are a lot of ACEs in this program, as a matter of fact. And that's because, I mean, present here, we learn together and work together. And that's a great way to learn is being told's good, doing it's good, creating it's better. Anyway, yeah, there was another comment.
Yeah, you know, if we go back to the other slide, the Vinci slide that's got a lot of boxes on it, that I would originally question, okay, the beauty of green, because I come from a cognitive universe, if you would, is that it automatically, you're part of the process, you're reducing cognitive overload.
That's right. Here you're
That in
reducing,
itself is such a huge win.
yeah, so here you're reducing what you're being taught from a cognitive overload, but you're increasing the cognitive overload in terms of your problems and what you have to deal with. Here you're giving a little bit more information, but you're not being overwhelmed with the problems. Now, I think that's what you also meant, but confirm that.
Well, no, not totally. Yeah, that's
Okay,
built into that. What I'm saying is that the pressure that you have in purple to
yeah,
deliver what is thought of as being the value you're trying
yeah,
to
that's
deliver.
what I meant. Yeah, that's
It's
clear.
okay. It's reduced considerably when you're
Yes.
green.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. That's good. That's a better way to say it.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's great. I love it.
yeah, yeah. I think, see, now what's interesting, the reason this costs less and the reason it's more
Mhm.
effective is two reasons. One of them is this one right here, and the no resistance and the motivation. But the other one is just the training methods. I've been studying training. I got into how to train like 40 years ago, actually, exactly 1984. I took a course myself in 83, and then I got really fascinated with what happened because it changed me a lot. I used to be very introverted. It's hard to tell, but I used to be, there are a lot of things I used to be. And it really wasn't like it changed me. It took off the stuff that wasn't me. I got to be what I really wanted to be doing and got past it. So I have a lot of faith that people can change their behavior. Okay. But it takes a long time. Some of us longer than others. But the issue here is like you say, is where is my energy going? We have only so much energy. We have only so much capacity. How am I guided? And yes, this has been portrayed as a simpler approach, but it's not. And it does put it on you, but it doesn't arm you with the tools you need. The beauty of patterns is that it gives you a way to expose what you need when you need it at the time you need it. And when I talked about training, I got a little bit distracted then with the history. But training in 2 days, if you're trying to, there is a case for that. I mean, I agree. Intense training is good when you're about to go and start something. Then you get the team together and it's a lot of collaboration. That's really good stuff. And if you're about to start a new job and you don't know stuff, then maybe a 2-day training is good too. But if we're talking about becoming a learning organization and educating people and having that be a standard thing, then you really want it to be some sort of ongoing knowledge where you can get what you need when you need it. Okay, we're at the top of the hour. Got another minute or two. If there's anything else somebody has to say or oh, good.
So,
Okay, good. Well, next week I'm going to go into, not next week, no session next week. Week after next week, we'll be going into the basically the next level of how, the Scrum quick start with Ampli that'll give an example of this to make it real. So thanks for being here. Yeah, I like this session. I liked how it
That's
went,
good.
what we have here. Take care.
Thank you, Al.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Al. See ya.
We'll see ya.